Well, tonight we're going to be talking about marriage maintenance, but the first thing I wanted to get into is really contrasting the difference between the grace of singleness and the grace of marriage. Those are essential things that you must understand the difference. And 1 Corinthians 7 goes into talking about that. Paul says, every man has been given his own gift. Some have been given this gift, another gift, and some have been given the gift of being married, and some have been given the gift of being single. Now, when you talk about spiritual gifts, a lot of times people have the idea, well, I've got this spiritual gift, and I'm praying for that spiritual gift, and they got 3, and I got 1. And I think I'm praying for 2 more, and they just got all this thing going on. They don't know, what's going on. But if anybody ever said anything to them about the gift and grace of being single, they'd say, well, if anybody ever handed it to me, I'd throw it off in the bushes. Right? I mean, you wouldn't want to have the gift of being single much. I mean, a lot of times people wouldn't want to think about that, having that gift. But the grace and gift of singleness is simply that if we have never married, or if we are currently not in a marriage relationship, God simply wants us to have the grace of singleness. I didn't marry until I was almost 32. And we got married in February the 9th, so we had our 27th wedding anniversary last Friday. 27 years. Can't even... married 27 years. And it's one of the famous things that Sarah likes to say is that when anybody gets in the flesh, they stink. That's one of her comments about life. And I'm sure you probably wouldn't assume that my being a Christian therapist, I've ever been in the flesh, but I have on occasion gotten off in the flesh. And there have been times when things weren't going as smooth as she probably thought they should be. And there have probably been times that she could have shot me. And if she had shot me, I would have hit the floor saying, thank you very much. It's kind of like that old story, just shoot up here amongst us, somebody's got to have some relief, you know what I'm saying? But anyway, we've had 27 years together, and they're better and better and better. I started off the week by sending her some 3 roses Monday, so she could have all week to enjoy them at the office. And then we got to go to Red Lobster today for lunch. So that's our favorite place to go have lunch. So anyway, we've had a good week. And for the kind of anniversary thing, last Saturday, we went up to actually with some people from Asbury United Methodist. They have a dinner theater, and they've asked me to be the music director for their big dinner theater this year, which they're doing the 75th anniversary of Grand Ole Opry. So somebody told them I knew something about country music kind of stuff, so they asked me to do it. But in any case, we went up there with them to Grand Ole Opry. It was the Ryman Auditorium. I don't know if you've ever been to the Ryman Auditorium, but it's something just above going to Niagara Falls or someplace. It's just a wonderful thing to be able to do. So we went up there and got to hear Ricky Skaggs. I mean, he was just throwing down on all this mandolin music. They were doing a tribute to Bill Monroe. So it was just wonderful. I can't spend a better day than hardly listening to good music. But anyway, so Sarah and I have been together for 27 years. But before we married, I had a number of years to learn to identify and to practice the grace of singleness. So I'd been in the Navy, and then I'd gone to college, and I'd worked for a year and went back for 2 more years of college, worked for another year at a residential treatment center, went back for 2 years of graduate school, doing all this stuff. And during that time, friends were getting married, and they were having children, and so I was helping them move furniture into new houses and going to the hospital and seeing them have babies and kind of watching the kids and doing things with them, But in the midst of all this, I wasn't married. And so I began to identify the grace of singleness. And I began to pray, Lord, give me the gift or the grace of singleness. Lord, I receive the grace of singleness, to see the benefits of being single, to have a sense of well-being about being single, to feel okay about being single, to not feel left behind or incomplete or lonely in being single, but to see the opportunities I have in pursuing education and serving you by being single. And Lord, I thank you for being single. I receive the grace of being single so that I'm okay with being single until it is your purpose for my life to be married. But I know in my being married, It's not the purpose of not being lonely or getting happy. That's not what marriage is about. But if there's a time in my life you feel like that I can be more effective in serving you by being married than my serving you as a single person, then I'm open to being married. But I know that I don't have to be married for the basis of being happy. Happiness is in God's grace. Happiness is in knowing God's purpose in your life. And so I would pray, Lord, I receive once in a while I'd start kind of churning, and sometimes it kind of a little bit worrisome and wondering and whatever. And I'd say, Lord, I receive your grace of singleness to feel a sense of well-being and to feel okay about my being single. And there can be in that grace of singleness, there's a great sense of well-being and quietness and peace. Knowing that God is more committed to providentially to his purposes in your life than you could ever be. And if God wanted me to be married, he was more committed to that than I could ever be. And after I left graduate school, actually, as I was leaving graduate school, they were supposed to have had 50 counselors hired under a federal grant in the state of Georgia to work with probation parole guys. And so they had people from every college and university in Georgia signing up for this thing. And it ended up, they only hired 5 people they were supposed to hire 50. Hired 5 people. And I was one of those 5 people. Do you think that's God's providence? Anybody believe that's God's providence? That was God's providence, my being able to work in a position like that. And so actually, they said, don't try to get into Atlanta. Everybody's going to try to go to Atlanta, so don't even try to apply for Atlanta. So I thought, well, I'll go to Albany, Georgia. I'd never been to Albany, Georgia, but I figured, Albany, Georgia, so what? Not too far from Atlanta. So I thought I might go down to Albany, Georgia for an interview, but they had an interview at Valdosta, Georgia prior to that. So I thought, well, I think I'll go down there and just do a dry run, kind of get an idea of what they're looking for. So I went down to Valdosta, Georgia, and I fell in love with the place. I liked the people I'd be working with. It had that old southern downtown court square, and it just azalea city and had all these pretty azaleas around. Great place. And I thought, I don't know what's over in Albany, but I'm not even checking that out. I'm going to Valdosta. So I went to Valdosta. Anybody believe that was God's providence? And when I went there, I talked to a couple of people. I'll make a long story short. And ended up renting a room from a lady that had raised 3 or 4 sons, who was about to retire from social work, who was a desk mate and a mentor to Sarah. And so I got there on Sunday. I found her by Wednesday. I moved in Wednesday night. She said, and then Thursday said she went to First United Methodist Church, downtown Valdosta. And she said, well, you want to go to church with me Sunday morning? I said, well, yeah, I probably will. But let me go see if I can find the Presbyterian church. I was raised Presbyterian. Presbyterian are known as the frozen chosen. You can go into a Presbyterian church, you wouldn't know whether they were praying or asleep. You wouldn't have a clue. You just wouldn't know what they were doing. But anyway, I was raised Presbyterian. And so I drove by the Presbyterian church, and I just drove by it slow. I could tell it was dead by looking at it. I didn't even go. So I went to church with her, First United Methodist. Well, guess who went to First United Methodist? Sarah, and her whole family went there. And so her mama met me, and her mama was real interested in me meeting, and Nell was real interested in me meeting Sarah. But anyway, had a lot of years to practice, identify, understand, work the grace of singleness. I can't overstate that. If we've never been married, it's important that we understand the grace of singleness. If we have been married and currently are not married, we need to understand the grace of singleness. Otherwise, there's a thing of feeling left out, incomplete, alone. We don't have a sense of well-being and peace and grace in our life. We just have a lack of happiness in our life, and we begin to think that the basis of happiness and the way to get happy is to get in another marriage. So often people say, well, I feel lonely and I don't feel happy, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to get married. And they get married and they say, something's not working right. And they think, well, I think the answer to this is I must have just got married to the wrong person. So they, get rid of one person, try to find somebody else so they don't feel lonely and they'll feel happy. Well, the whole thing of happiness is not about being married or not married. Happiness is about knowing God's grace and His purpose in your life. So, in any case, I can't overstate the importance of understanding, identifying, practicing, exercising the grace of singleness. If you've never married, or if you're currently not married. And you'll have that sense of well-being and that sense of grace and that sense of quietness and that sense of happiness and God's purpose being worked out in your life. But if you need the grace of singleness as you're single, then you need a double portion, a double blessing of grace in marriage. And so there's also a grace of marriage. There's a grace of singleness and a grace of marriage. And if we're not praying and asking and exercising the grace of marriage, then we're going to feel sometimes like this marriage is a yoke instead of a blessing. This marriage, the whole thing is, I could soar with the wings of an eagle if I wasn't married to this turkey. You ever felt that way? Raise your hand. Anybody besides me? So the grace of marriage is equally important to identify and to understand and to exercise, to pray for, to receive. Lord, I receive the grace of marriage. I receive the grace of marriage to have a sense of well-being about being married, a sense of the benefits of being married, to be able to appreciate being married, to be able to appreciate the person I'm married to, the grace of marriage. Without that grace, we won't enjoy it as God really intends and desires for us to enjoy it. Over the last 5 weeks, we've talked about a lot of different things. We've talked about a little bit about the developmental stages of faith. And maybe sometimes I can come back and we'll cover the whole thing, but we talked a little bit about the difference between childhood faith, adolescent faith, young adult faith, midlife faith, old age faith, and dying faith. And I wanted to cover some of that with you each week because I think it's so important to understand where you are, what stage, what characteristics of faith are you in, and understand that the Holy Spirit is wanting you to mature and grow into the next level of faith. Another thing that I enjoy talking about sometimes, and I don't think I've mentioned that in this particular last several weeks, but all the different messages that go on within people I think are very fascinating. Maybe sometimes I can come back and talk about that. But there are at least 12 different messages, I think probably 12 messages go on within people. And so a lot of times when people come in for counseling, what I'm doing is helping them interpret these messages, where they're coming from. People can get rather distressed or confused or bewildered because they have so many messages going on within them and they don't know which message to listen to. But you have the message of birth order, and you have the message of gender. You have the message of family systems. You have the message of your personality. You have the message of peer pressure. You have the message of your flesh. You have the message of God's Spirit trying to direct you. You have a message of Satan trying to deceive you. You have ethnic messages and traditions. You have all kind of cultural messages and traditions. You have religious traditions and messages. And then you have God's calling and purpose in your life. So at any one time, you have at least 12 different messages going on within you. And so sometimes what I'm doing in counseling is helping them to interpret those messages. If I'm talking to a husband and wife, sometimes I end up saying, the man will say something, and I'll say, all right, now let me interpret what you're trying to say. Men are like this. This is the way they think. This is what their needs are. And this is what he's trying to express. I interpret that for the wife. And then the wife, she might say something. And I say, now, let me interpret for you what you're trying to say. No, I say, now, women are like this. And women think this way and feel this way, and their needs are like this. And what she's trying to express to you is this. And so I'm trying to interpret different kind of messages. Sometimes it's birth order messages. Sometimes it's family system messages. Sometimes it's flesh messages. Sometimes it's personality messages. All kinds of different messages going on within people. And another thing we've covered over the last number of weeks is talking about the importance of reading the Bible. In Jeremiah 15:16, I've mentioned that to you each week, is to begin to pray that. Jeremiah 15:16, thy words were found, and I'd eat them, and they were the joy and the rejoicing of my heart. And urging you to begin to pray that God would give you a heart that has a joy and a rejoicing in His Word, so that you can purpose within yourself to get a one-year Bible and start reading through the entire Bible every year for the rest of your life. If you'll do that for 10 years, you'll begin to have some understanding of God and how His patterns and how you can manage your life better. If you do it for the rest of your life, you'll most likely die a godly person, that's the way God wants you to die, as a godly person. Well, one of the things I wanted to look at your handout. I'm not going to go over a whole lot of this, but I'm going to go over some of it. Turn over to the page on types of marriages. I thought I might just kind of spend a minute reviewing the 7 different types of marriages. Again, in understanding marriage, you want to understand the differences between the grace of singleness and the grace of marriage. But there are different types of marriages. And what we want to do is to work towards a healthy, mature marriage, the way God has designed it. Following with me. The type of marriage we have is shaped by our birth order, the dominant characteristics of our flesh, and our reaction to our family system background. Our objective is to learn and to grow towards God's design for marriage. So birth order, whether you're firstborn, middle child, lastborn, that significantly, primarily shapes your adult patterns of behavior, your birth order. But also the dominant characteristic of our flesh. We talked about that, I think, the second week we were here talking about the problems of sin. Also strongly shapes our behavior in marriage relationships. Certainly our family system background certainly does. How did your family system do things? Was your family system chaotic, or was it loud and argumentative, or was it kind of quiet, or what was it? Whatever was going on in your family system as you were growing up shapes your own perspectives and attitudes. And what we tend to do when we get married, we have a tendency to impose our family script on the other person, or we intend to interpret what they're doing in light of our family system. Another person may be quiet because they grew up in a family system that was quiet, and yet the other person grew up in a family system where if you were quiet, you were mad and withdrawn and rejecting and angry. And so every time the other person is quiet, they think, well, they must be mad at me and angry at me and withdrawn from me and rejected me and angry or something. And so you get uncomfortable with the other person being quiet. All kind of little family system messages like that. Okay, let's quickly go over these 7 types of marriages. The first type of marriage is, I want to escape. The message is, I want to escape my chaotic home environment and or the control of my mom and dad and or the physical, emotional, or sexual abuses at home. I need a fresh start. And that person needs to be praying, Lord, I'm willing to be willing for your will to be done in my life. A second type of marriage would be, we have to get married. A marriage of convenience, made for social, career, or financial benefit. The message is, we have been sexually active, or I'm pregnant, so that we should get married and or feel obligated to parents and friends to get married for whatever reason. The problem is that often ends up feeling trapped, victimized, hurt, and angry by feeling pressured and getting married prematurely. The prayer would be, Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be pleasing in your sight, for you alone are my strength and my Redeemer. Another type of marriage would be, I'm lonely and unhappy and need someone to take care of me. The message is, if I get married, then I won't be lonely and I'll be happy. The sub-message in second marriages is, I need someone to help me finish raising these children and or someone to help me pay these bills. The problem is idolatry. The basis of happiness is knowing God's grace and purpose for your life, and it's not based upon whether or not you're married. The prayer would be, Lord, I receive your grace to deliver me from this passion and or from this danger. I receive your grace to do the next right thing. Sometimes you have the type of marriage that's a children-focused marriage. I want children, and I just love children. Children would give me something of my very own that belongs to me, that no one can ever take away, that I can love and have love me. The problem is, the sins or blessings of the fathers are inherited by the children to the 3rd and 4th generation. Children are a heritage and reward from the Lord. The prayer would be, Lord, I thank you for my children and pray that you will enable me to establish a godly heritage for my children. Or another type of marriage would be a social worker therapeutic marriage, a position of codependency. The message would be this person needs someone to listen to them and encourage them. The problem is marriage is not about rescuing or healing or finish raising someone. The prayer would be, Lord, I trust you with all my heart, and I will not place my confidence in my own understanding. Another type of marriage might be an evangelism marriage, a Madonna or Messiah complex. The message would be, if I date this poor lost soul and or compromise my conscience and or become sexually active and or marry this person, even against my parents' and friends' warnings, maybe I can get them into church and they will believe in God and become a Christian. The problem is marriage is not about having a Messiah complex and taking the place of the Holy Spirit. The prayer would be, Jesus, please reveal yourself to me and have mercy upon me and save me. A marriage made in heaven, a healthy, mature marriage would be, we marry a family system made up of the previous 3 and 4 generations. The message is, I know we're old enough and are mature enough to make this lifelong commitment. We have the heartfelt blessing of our parents and those we love and trust. We're strong, healthy, growing Christians who desire God's perfect will in our life. Problem facing the winds, floods, and rains of life together as you become one flesh. The prayer would be, Lord, I thank you for my mate. Bless us as we learn to implement your principles in our life. You might identify yourself in one of those, but people get married for all different types of reasons, but God wants to work in our lives, so we're working toward His design, a mature, a healthy commitment, so that we're having the happiness that we really hope to be able to have in our marriage relationships. Let's take another look at another page here, about probably the 5th page, 6th page over. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8th page. Just says some things about the covenant family. That's why I do these handouts. There's so much stuff to cover in this that I just can't cover in the little time we have here. But on the covenant family, let me read some of that material to you. Our present post-Christian neo-pagan hedonistic culture represents a new dark age where we have politics without principle, pleasure without character, and knowledge without morality. Christians have become an increasingly oppressed minority in politics and education. Violence has increasingly become a way of life. The only hope is a cultural, spiritual awakening to biblical Christianity. The covenant family is God's institutional forge for shaping Christ-like character and those related by blood, marriage, and adoption, for establishing His kingdom, confirming His covenant, and identifying their purpose in the body of Christ to the glory of God. Kind of start at the top. The human race. No one is a perfect person. No one comes from a perfect family background. Everyone functions in a normal, healthy way some of the time. No one functions in a normal, healthy way all the time. Welcome to the human race. Everyone would enjoy this next definition of men. Men are basically uncivilized, nomadic barbarians who need to be tamed by God. Can I get a witness by any of the ladies here? Men are basically uncivilized, nomadic barbarians who need to be tamed by God. Men are wanderers. It is only a matter of time and opportunity before they wander into sin if they're not committed to God's purpose in their life. God has assigned men a position neither earned nor deserved. A covenant position of responsibility to provide, protect, and seek the emotional and spiritual well-being of his wife and children. Men are to exercise the positions of prophet, priest, and king. Prophet to speak the truth with sound judgment and kindness. Priest to listen, encourage, and pray for God's grace and blessing. And king to provide, protect, and make sound decisions based on a good conscience and godly convictions. You might want to review that. But men, I know when Sarah leaves town, I enjoy when she leaves town, but when she leaves town, I get nomadic. And so I go over and visit my sister. You know, normally I maybe don't get to go over and see her very often, so I go over and see my sister, and I might go out and eat at Cracker Barrel, or maybe I'll slide over and visit a different church, or maybe I'll get to go to a movie I've been wanting to go to, and we've been too busy to. So, you know, men, one of the big difference between men and women is that women, the thing that women do, women make a house a home. And they make a group of people a family. But that's not what men do. Men have a place where they stay. But they don't make that a home. Women make it a home. And so, you know, if she's gone out of town, then that's just kind of where I'm staying. I change clothes and sleep there, but otherwise I'm off doing something. I go see my sister, or go out to eat somewhere, go to visit a different church maybe, or go to a movie someplace. But, you know, get out and do something. But men are basically uncivilized, nomadic barbarians. I know we have a chocolate lab. Now, before that, we had a female golden retriever and a female Sheltie. And we could let them stay out in the yard all the time. They never left the yard. Never left the yard. Just easy to handle. We've got a chocolate lab. You would figure out probably is a male. He is a male. And being a male, if he ever gets off his leash, he is like ballistic. He doesn't even hesitate. He is like a flashing brown flash bullet leaving the yard, and you lose sight of him. And he likes to spend several hours. Sometimes we have to go pick him up at the vet, you know, or something, because he likes to go disappear in the neighborhoods and running around with other dogs, and he just keeps going. Okay, marital bonding. Marital bonding, men are the same way. We just kind of like to wonder. Marital bonding is the adhesive process of God joining a man and a woman into a created union of a covenant relationship. It includes the social bonding of friendship and companionship, an emotional bonding of romantic feelings of being in love, the legal bonding of names and estates, the sexual bonding of pleasure and procreation, and the spiritual bonding of a created union. The home. A wife and a mother makes a house a home, or a group of people a family. The wise woman builds her house, but with her own hands the foolish woman tears hers down. Family. In a healthy covenant Christian family, parents are to be God's hands extended to bless, affirm, nurture, and validate. Blessing. You are precious to me is experienced in our spirit. Affirmation, I believe in you, is experienced in our character. Nurturing, I love you, is experienced in our personality. And validation, I respect you, is experienced in our conscience. If you could be a perfect parent, it would not guarantee the obedience or respect of your children. God being a perfect father to Adam and Eve in a perfect environment did not guarantee their obedience. God being a perfect head of Israel, Jesus being a perfect head of the church, and the Holy Spirit being a perfect comforter does not guarantee obedience. Managing life. Life is not static, rather life is fluid. In the physical, when life becomes static, a death process begins. When we are authoritative, perfectionist, compulsive, and demanding, our relationships with others begin to shut down and a death process begins. Life, people, and relationships are not something you fix. Rather, life is something you learn to manage as you continue to learn and grow spiritually. The Christian faith. The Christian faith is not a religion, but rather a relationship with God through the sufficiency of the death of Christ. This relationship makes us an heir of the inheritance of God's purpose and mission for our life. We're to join all of creation in praise and thanksgiving for who God is and all that He does by His grace and mercy. He swore by Himself, saying, I will surely bless you. Father in heaven revealed to me that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God. That's kind of an overview. We had a lot of time. We'd kind of go into some detail on that, but I want to get to the second page and kind of expand on that a little bit. On the second page, we have a handout I give people on marriage maintenance. The thing I want to try to you remember tonight about marriage is this. When you are dating the social system self. But when you marry the family system self. And it's like two different parts of our personality. It's like two different pieces of software. And what happens when we are dating someone and we're dating the social system self, then that's the self that's part of the personality we take to work and take to church and take to school, and we dress them up and we educate them and we really work at trying to develop skills in the social system self. Basically, our role in our family system growing up and this kind of the structure of our family system. So kind of a combination of birth order and the structure of the family system you grew up in. Kind of combination of that. So you date the social system self, but you marry the family system self. There's two different, many times vastly different kinds of scripts. But what happens is before you marry, people are typically spending time together 6 and 7 times a week. Because it's the dating self before you get married. And there's many times people are doing something 6 or 7 times a week. They're investing a lot of time and a lot of energy in their friendship. The social system self includes the friendship. Out of friendship comes closeness. Out of closeness comes openness. Out of openness comes communication. Out of communication comes sexual interest, sexual desires. Those 5. That's all in the social system self, and it will always be in the social system self. All right, now before people get married, typically they're spending a lot of time together. They're investing a lot of energy in their friendship. And because they're investing so much energy in the friendship, they do feel close, and they do feel open, and they are able to communicate. And so sometimes people come in for counseling and say, well, we just can't communicate. And it's like they somehow think of communication as an isolated concept or variable when it's all connected to a pattern. Before you get married, when you're spending 6 or 7 times a week together, you're investing so much time and energy in the friendship that you have so much friendship, and then the closeness and the openness and communication. The communication is wonderful. Before you get married, typically people aren't saying, well, I think I need to go down to the Christian bookstore and find some books on irreconcilable differences. I need to find a book on men are from Mars and women are from Venus or whatever. I need to read a book on the 5 love languages in marriage. And how many people are going, before they get married, are reading all these books? Seldom. Before you get married, how many people are going for counseling? Well, I know I have so many irreconcilable differences. We're just so opposite. We're just so different. I think what we're going to do is get married so we can spend a fortune and make ourselves miserable for the next 20 years. That doesn't sound right, does it? That's not what people are doing. All they're doing is spending time together. That's all they're doing. More important than friends? More important than work? More important than everything they do is around doing something together. They get to the point where they say, I don't care what we do, as long as we do it together. If you want to go fishing, I'll go out there and watch you fish. I don't like those old fish. I'm not going to put that worm on that hook, but I'll watch you fish. I don't like bowling. I'll go watch you bowl. Whatever it is. Why? They just kind of enjoy doing things together. They have this friendship, and they're doing something together all the time. And so because of that, they build this wonderful friendship. They're just having lots of fun. And because of that great friendship, they just feel so close. They feel closer to anyone than they've ever felt before. They feel so close. It is so exciting. And because of being so close, they're more open with that person than they've ever been open with anyone before. They're open in their heart and spirit. And because they're so open in their heart and spirit, they're just communicating. They're just talking. They're sharing dreams and failures and hurts and disappointments and hopes and all kinds of, they just open, just talking about all kinds of stuff. It's so exciting. It feels so wonderful to be able to be that open and that close and talking with someone. And then what do we do after we get married? Well, after we get married, we're spending more time together, but increasingly the time that people spend together is in the family system self, not in the social system self. And the family system self is a different piece of software. It's a different part of your personality. And so you're spending increasing amounts of time at home in the family system self. Anytime you walk in the door, you're in your family system self. Anytime you walk outside the door, you're in the social system self. It's almost that clear. But you spend an increasing amount of time. And so that people begin to do just wonderful, clever things. They come home from work and they're tired. So they sit on the couch and watch TV. Get bored out of their skull. And then in the midst of all that, what are they losing? They're simply losing their friendship. They don't know what they're losing. They just know they're losing something. Actually, the feeling is, I know I'm doing my part. Look, honey, I'm doing my part. And so I think the conclusion of this thing is, it's your problem. Because I know I'm doing the best I know how to do. The other person says, I don't think so. I'm doing my best. I think you're the one that's got the problem. And so what happens? They simply begin to lose their sense of friendship. And because they lose the sense of friendship, they feel grieved. They feel lonely. They begin to feel distant. They miss the friendship. And so they start losing that friendship and they start feeling hurt. And in that hurt and loneliness, they start finding all kinds. They begin critical and they get picky and why don't you do this, why don't you do that? They start like verbal piranha going at each other all the time. And then what that does is make things even worse. And so you've not only lost your friendship, you're hurt, you're feeling lonely, and then you're begin more distance, so you're not as close. And then you're not as close, you're more distant, so you end up feeling increasingly closed in your heart and spirit. And as you become closed in your heart and spirit, you're not able to communicate. You have nothing to say to one another. And you lose your communication. And then you lose your sexual interest. And you don't know what's wrong. You know something's wrong. Typically both people in a marriage are working very, very hard at being very, very responsible, but losing each other. And they don't understand why. Sometimes I tell people, sometimes it really is embarrassing to have degrees and be licensed as a licensed professional counselor. I was going to say a minute ago, I hope it's never on tape that you refer to me as a clinical psychologist. I'm a licensed professional counselor, and clinical psychologists would become incensed. They're real sensitive about things like that. Anyway, I'm at the ballpark that I don't, clinical psychologists are really very significant part of mental health. But what they do is not what I do. Psychiatrists are wonderful. I promise you, they're wonderful. They're the ones that study the neurobiology and all the neurotransmitters and the mood and chemical imbalances. And boy, what psychiatrists do is absolutely, it's just wonderful. It's so important what they study and what they learn and what they understand about people. And clinical psychologists are required to have a PhD in clinical psychology. And what they do is wonderful. Testing and research and all kinds of things that clinical psychologists get into that's different. And designs of the personality and all kinds of things they study. It's really just remarkable what they do. But licensed professional counselors are kind of like mechanics. They're kind of more oriented toward the application of what you learn from psychiatry and psychology and how that kind of applies in the lives of people and works out in relationships. And it's just a different little focus and a little different application of things. But anyway, psychiatrists are just very, very valuable, and God placed them in culture, and clinical psychologists are a great blessing in our culture, particularly the ones that are Christians and would be helpful to them not being contrary to people where they were spiritually or something. In any case, we're talking about marriage maintenance. Look at the marriage maintenance handout there. Maintain your friendship and companionship by continuing to do fun things together. Maintain your friendship and companionship by continuing to do fun things together. The two primary principles for a strong and healthy marriage are maintain a profound friendship, but continue to do fun things together, and preserve the home as a sanctuary of peace. Circle that. That is the core of the whole truth of maintaining a healthy, stable marriage, right there. Why do people get married? They enjoy going places and doing things together. What do people do after they get married? They gradually stop going places and doing things together. What happens as a result? They begin to lose their friendship and companionship and start to feel lonely, hurt, and angry. Where do they attempt to resolve hurt feelings? Attempting to resolve conflicts within the home has a high degree of failure. Probably 200%. Maintain your home as a sanctuary of peace by not violating it with conflict. Other than the house being on fire, there is nothing that justifies violating the home as a sanctuary of peace. Maintain your closeness, communication, sexual attraction by protecting your friendship and discussing issues away from the home. When you date the social system self. Who you are outside the home includes friendship, companionship, closeness, communication, sexual attraction. The social system self has the capacity for understanding, analyzing, negotiating, compromising, and resolving issues. When you marry them, you marry this family system self. Who you are within the home includes your role and dynamics within the family or origin you grew up in, along with the desire to be more quiet or relaxed at home. Relationships are not about being right, but having a right relationship. The statement I give people, I do acknowledge my created need is emotional intimacy, and I'm willing to share my inner space with you. Circle that. If you're married, I'd love for you to start saying that tonight, one another, to just start saying it aloud to one another at night. There was a guy that came in years ago. He had been a fighter pilot in Vietnam as an engineer. His dad was kind of a critical perfectionist kind of guy, and it had affected him in such a way that he was just not able to nurture, be very open, and have a lot of openness and emotional intimacy with his wife. And they came in, and he was addicted to pornography, and she was about ready to divorce him, and she was depressed, and things were getting kind of difficult. And so I said to him, I said, well, what y'all need is emotional intimacy. And they both kind of fell out of their chair. I said, well, how do you get that? I mean, what catalog can you order that from? What website can you click on to try to find that? How much does it weigh? What color is it? How in the world do you know whether you've got it or hadn't got it, or how do you get it and how do you keep it? We talked about that last week, about emotional intimacy a little bit. So I gave him this statement. I do acknowledge my primary created need is emotional intimacy. And we talked about that John 17 last week. And if you simply believe that is a spiritual truth, and so if you simply state a spiritual truth, it begins to generate within you the capacity to do that. And so I said, what I'd like for you to do is take this statement home and begin to read it aloud to one another every night before you go to sleep, and then come back in. And they came back in, and he had begun generating a capacity with him to be more open with his wife, and he was thrilled. He was more open and intimate with her than he had ever been in their whole 15 years of being married. Regardless of how hurt and angry I may get, I promise I will never, ever threaten you with divorce. Okay, let's close with that next page there. I made an extra handout on that because it is just so important that you understand. It mentions on the other handout, but I made an extra handout just to emphasize it. Maintain the home as a sanctuary of peace. God is three persons in one, equal in power and glory, God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. As God's image bearers, we're also a Trinity, body, soul, and spirit. The Old Testament tabernacle is a picture of the Trinity, the outer courtyard, holy place, holy of holies. The home is also a picture of the Trinity, the physical home, emotional home, spiritual home. With the Old Testament tabernacle, the priest could go in only once per year and only after careful ceremonial cleansing. If the priest ever went in without proper preparation, then God would strike him dead. Likewise, our being created in the image of God, if someone comes into our space without proper reverence, then we close our spirit, and that person becomes as spiritually dead to us. This is what happens in the home when there's confrontation, conflict, anger, lashing out with hurtful words. When you maintain a high level of friendship, then most of these issues are prevented. When something needs to be discussed, then say, let's go for a walk or let's go for a ride. Other than the house being on fire, there's nothing that justifies violating the home as a sanctuary of peace. Relationships are not about being right, but having a right relationship. The other parts that kind of review. This is what happens. Because we're created in the image of God, in the courtyard, if you were in covenant relationship with God, you had access to the outer courtyard, the laver of cleansing, the altar of sacrifice, and the altar of incense. But only the high priest could go in the Holy of Holies and Holy Place once a year. And that was with great preparation and ceremonial cleansing and reverence. Now, the home's the same thing. We're a Trinity. The home's a Trinity. And so the primary need that people have, the primary need I have, the primary need that you have is to have some place in your world that is safe. And as soon as you violate the home with confrontation and conflict and anger, you've violated that home as a sanctuary of peace, and you have no place in your world that's safe. 85% of the physical problems that people have are due to grief and stress and shame and all kinds of unresolved things. That's why we were talking so much about that the last several weeks. But if you allow confrontations and conflicts and angers in the home, then you have violated the home as a sanctuary of peace, and you have no place in your world that's safe. And that constant living in stress is what breaks people down physically. So you have headaches and gastrointestinal problems, high blood pressure, sleep problems, don't get restorative sleep, and you're in a rapid decline in your immune system because of the stress, and you have all kind of major physical problems because we don't have a place in our world that is safe. Now, I promise you, I'm as serious as a heart attack, and this is biblically a great, strong, significant truth, that your home is to be a sanctuary of peace. If that's not been true in your home, I would urge you tonight to purpose within yourself that your home is to be a sanctuary of peace. And anything that needs to be discussed that you think might cause some conflict, because you know their various areas are kind of delicate. So we need to go for a walk, we need to go for a ride, but let's go, and if we can't talk our way through it, let's go talk to the pastor. Or come talk to me, whatever. If you get stuck, you don't know what's going on, you can't figure it out, then it's like going to a good coach, good life trainer, physical trainer. The home is to be a sanctuary of peace. And what happens? Because we've neglected this social system self, because we've neglected this sense of friendship, and we begin to feel lonely, and we start feeling hurt, and we begin to be more distant, and we're not close, and we're not feeling so open, and we can't communicate, we increasingly feel grief and rejection and shame and hurt and fear. We're increasingly distant from one another. You start trying to resolve those things in the home. You don't even know what's wrong. You keep talking about this stuff. You get angry and defensive and saying all kinds of things that you normally wouldn't say. Until finally you're emotionally exhausted and you're hopeless because your relationship's not working. And it all comes out of not understanding how to maintain a high level of friendship, investing in that friendship, along with being committed to preserving your home as a sanctuary of peace. What happens in the home when you have conflicts and confrontations and angers and hurts, you do the same thing that God does. You close your heart and spirit, and you become emotionally and spiritually dead. Isn't that horrible? Isn't that tragic? It's the opposite of why you got married. You were so full of delight and pleasure because of this wonderful friendship, this wonderful closeness, this wonderful openness, this wonderful communication, because you were investing in the friendship. The reason I asked to have those cards put out, because the cards on both sides of the business cards, one is the secrets to good mental health using the reveal, release, receive. We've talked about that in previous weeks. And on the other side, it has a statement that what is the secret of maintaining a healthy, successful marriage? And that is maintain a high level of friendship and not ever violating by doing fun things together and never violating the home as a sanctuary of peace. That is such a simple but profound truth that if you will practice the keys to the kingdom, then things will not become bound up within you and you will be happy as an individual. And as you practice this truth that the home is a sanctuary of peace, and investing in your friendship, you can have all the pleasure that God ever intended and desired that you have in your marriage relationship. Okay, we need to close. Close your eyes real quick. And let's do a meditation before we quit. In your mind, close your eyes, kind of compose yourself, take a deep breath, and in your mind, go to the Garden of Eden. See a beautiful meadow, large oak tree, brick walkways, beautiful flowers, nice brook of water. Peaceful, peaceful place. Let's review the other meditation quickly. See Jesus there with you. Try to pull in as clear as you can. See Jesus there with you. And hear Jesus say, peace. Be still. Remember the story when he's out on the Sea of Galilee? He spoke to the storm. He has the authority. Feel the breath. He says, peace. Feel the gentle breath of his speaking that into you. Peace. Be still. And look around the garden there and see some trash and pick up the trash of grief of the present, recent past, or distant past. Things that have caused grief and great sorrow. Take your time. Pick up the things you know that have caused, from the present, recent past, distant past, things you know that have caused grief and great sorrow. See Jesus walking along with you, picking up that each memory like a piece of trash, putting it in a big trash bag. Pick up the trash of shame. Shame is a feeling, it's not that I've just done something wrong, that's guilt. But there's something wrong with me. I'm odd, I'm bent, I'm broke. There's something inadequate, inferior, there's something it's unchangeable. I want to hide and keep a secret. Sometimes it's connected to things that we've done to others. Sometimes it's connected to things that have been done to us. Shame. From the present, recent past, distant past. Find various memories of shame. Pick them up like you would a piece of trash. Put it in a big trash bag. Jesus strolling along with you. Take your time. Pick up the memories of shame. Pick up the memories of hurt, feeling emotionally wounded, your heart broken from the present, recent past, distant past. Find those memories. As you find them, pick them up and put them in that big trash bag. Hurt. Fear. Can include being nervous, anxious, can include terror. Pick up the various memories of the present, recent past, or distant past of fear. The death of a child, or the death of a parent, or an automobile wreck, or being sexually molested, or raped, or physically abused, all kinds of things that happen in life, car wrecks, all kinds of things happen that cause terror. Find the memories of fear. As you find them, pick them up and put them in that big trash bag. Look around the garden to see if there are any loose ends or secrets. Be sure you have everything picked up. Put it all in that big trash bag. See yourself as clearly as you can. Pull it in as clearly as you can, and see yourself handing that big bag of stuff to Jesus. See Jesus hand it to two big, tall, strong angels. See the angels carry it over to the edge of the garden and drop it off into the abyss. Pull it in as clearly as you can. See the whole picture flowing. How do you feel handing that big bag of stuff to Jesus? Jesus handed it to two big, tall, strong angels. The angels carry it over to the edge of the garden and drop it off into the abyss. And here Jesus charged those angels to remain with you as ministering angels as you continue to work through the things you need to learn. As you're single, see there in the garden, Jesus there with you, and say to Jesus, Jesus, I receive the grace of singleness. It doesn't postpone your day of ever being married one day. It just means as you are single, God wants you to have a sense of well-being. And you're being single. If you're presently not married, say to the Lord, Lord, I receive the grace of singleness. To feel okay, to see the benefits in serving you, happiness, sense of well-being, and knowing your purposes in my life. I receive the grace. Lord, I receive your grace of singleness. If you're married, say to Jesus, they're in the garden, standing underneath this great oak tree. Say to Jesus, Jesus, I receive the grace of marriage. I receive the grace of marriage. Receive it. Practice that grace daily. Otherwise, the marriage only can be a burden, a yoke. Lord, I receive the grace, your grace of marriage. They're in the garden, there with Jesus. Say, Jesus, I purpose and commit myself to protecting and investing in my friendship if you're married. I purpose, commit myself to investing and protecting our friendship of going places and doing things together so we can have the closeness, so we can have the openness, so we can have the communication, so we can have the sexual desire and pleasure. I receive, Lord, I purpose to protect and invest in our friendship. And I purpose to never again violate our home as a sanctuary of peace. If there's something that needs to be discussed, we'll go for a walk, go for a ride. But I will not violate our home as a sanctuary of peace.